I'm with Odeniyi, who is a cybersecurity and digital transformation consultant. Now, Olu, you're talking a little bit later about moving things to the cloud. So what sort of things do people need to consider security and privacy-wise when that's something they want to do?
Well, the first thing I would say, Carla, is they need to do a lot of planning, right? And you do start really with the business goals, because you need to consider what sort of cloud solution exists. Is it going to be software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service? Are you going to do a lift and shift, which is taking your current applications and just stick them into a cloud server?
I like that phrase. I've not heard that one before.
Lift and shift.
Yeah. We'll go with that.
Or will you need to refactor your code? And that means to redesign your code to work in the cloud, but you don't actually change any of the functionality. But there's a huge number of things to do, and if you're a company that's already been doing a lot of data mapping, because you've looked at GDPR or other privacy laws, and you understand where your data's coming from, that's great. If you haven't done that, then it's a bit like moving home, really. So when you move home, you discover a whole load of things that you didn't realise you had.
Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity to do that when you move, if you're moving all of your data to the cloud. But then I'd say you need to do a lot of planning. Think about what new. So the cloud gives agility. New ways of connecting with your customers and so on. So there might be new, internal, external data migration points, or not migration, but places where data crosses over. Mm-hmm. So that's got to be considered as well. So I think that mapping out your data, finding out what data you've got, so you know whereabouts in the cloud and under which security to put it in, is really, really key. Mm-hmm. And when you've done all of that planning, and there's a few more bits to it as well, then I think you need to make sure your staff are thoroughly, or those who are going to be performing the migration, are thoroughly trained on configuration. And if you look at, for example, Symantec's first data report, what you'll find is AW3 containers in the cloud is where we've seen lots of breaches.
Okay.
And it's not because AW3 lacks the controls, it's rather the information or the knowledge, configuration knowledge, hasn't been fully absorbed by those who are doing the migration.
Now, what if companies are putting some of their applications into the cloud but keeping some legacy systems? What sort of challenges does that throw up?
Well, I always say that for a company, they ought to start really with security policies anyway. And security policy, before we touch anything technical, we understand what our attitude towards security is going to be. And we've done our data mapping, so we know what data we've got. And therefore, if they're moving to the cloud and only putting some of the data into the cloud, they need to make sure that they review their security policies and decide, therefore, what needs to happen from a configuration perspective. And if you think about a company that's got new access, so let's say, for example, they put some data in the cloud because they want to add an increased value proposition to their customers. Take Tesco, for example. They launched an app where you can do more things with your club card and so on. I think something like 4.5 million people downloaded that on the first day, and you've got to put your details into this app, right? So that's a new place now where you can have a breach, and what's going to be the impact, or what is the potential impact? So I think that if you're moving some of the data to the cloud, you certainly have to go back and look at your security policies. You possibly have to do a mini risk assessment on that data that's going to the cloud, and then work out the best way. It will ensure really that it's still going to deliver the value that you want it to deliver, the extra value to your customer, but at the right cost in terms of any increased cost is of security.
Now, we're talking a lot today about privacy. So where do you think privacy and security intersect? Are they just intertwined? Are they noticeably different for you?
So there is a connection between the two, absolutely, but they are also different. And I would suggest that if you don't have security, then you can't guarantee privacy either. So it's really quite key, I think, to make sure that that you've done, that you've taken the attitude to risk, you've done your risk assessment, you've found out what gaps you may have from a security point of view, and plug those gaps, or make sure you're security safe. And then you'll be in a position to work out how you're going to work with privacy. But certainly, absolutely is a link between the two. Because if you're breached, of course, if someone is inside your network and they're exfiltrating your data, then you've not done a very good job from a privacy point of view.
No. So security first, and then privacy is the next layer.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think that if you speak to someone from the legal profession or possibly a DPO, they may well be privacy focused, and they might say, well, no, these are our policies for privacy, and that's fine to start from that angle. But then it's understanding what's needed to achieve that, and security is certainly going to be part of that. So I think depending on who you speak to, if you speak to a security guy, they'll say, well, you've got to do security first, and then you can make your privacy. But I think it's okay to start from privacy, as long as you understand that security is going to be needed in order to be able to fulfill those privacy goals.
Now, obviously, a lot of companies are moving to the cloud. So from your point of view, is the cloud more secure, less secure, or just different risks?
I think the risks are different, and there's some elements of cloud security which I think is more secure. So if you take the guy, in his back, you take a small company who have a server that's located on site, for example, and you compare that with perhaps the protection around an AWS data center, then I think you'll find much more physical security. If you think about the firewalls and the number of devices you'd have typically in a small or medium or even a large business compared to what Amazon have, then I think you'll find more security at the Amazon data center or the Microsoft data center and so on. The key thing to realize about security, mind you, is that a lot of security is about human behaviors, and that's where the weakest link is. So regardless of whether you go into the cloud or not, the huge part of security is about what we do from a policy and focus point of view in terms of ensuring the human isn't the weakest link.
Yes, and we're hearing a lot about that at the moment, actually, okay. that part, aren't we, I think. Is that something you're seeing too?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a lot of breaches are by mistake. We heard recently, for example, Microsoft were breached, Hotmail accounts were breached, and I believe it was a support engineer who he was somehow breached. Nothing wrong with the systems necessarily, although when there is a breach, we always look at the technology to see if we could have used technology to make to have stopped that, prevented that breach. But absolutely, it's about the human link, and for a good time yet, the humans are going to be very much, I think, the weakest link in security.
Definitely. All right. Well, that's been really fascinating. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Yeah, thank you, Carla.
Thank you.